actually did some tests on this kind of what you call PK, and he discovered that PK is a short-circuiting between the brain of the individual and the environment, because apparently we do interact very intimately with our environment, and sometimes if there is this short circuit, messages from the brain do not reach the body. They exit the body right around the area of the brain stem and interact directly with the environment.
That's interesting. Like I teach some philosophy classes, and every semester I teach an introduction course where we get into Descartes toward the end of the semester, and he's talking about the mind-body interaction, and the question about mind over matter. I think if you just wave your arm around, that's the example of mind over matter.
Absolutely.
And you're saying that this could go outside the body in the same fashion.
Exactly. It's exactly the right analogy to draw, and it's because what happens is there's a short circuit, and instead of it reaching the body in some way, it exits at that point. And I think they even did some EEG work. They put some electrodes on some of these people that were able to do PK, and this is how they came to this realization that the energy that was being generated in the brain, exited at this point. It only went as far as the brain stem, and that was where it exited the body. So that there is, and in Chinese philosophy, this area at the back of the head, just below the occipital ridge, is called, the Jade Gate. So it is the point at which we connect with our environment, and
the other portal would be maybe the pineal door that's been referred to.
Well, yes and no. I think they would probably work interactively, but for the energy to go directly into the environment, it probably would have to run down, it's electrical energy, electromagnetic energy. So
you're saying that, say, the phenomenon of, say, a bed levitating with a possessed person, it's the possessed person himself or herself that's causing that, not the possessing entity.
Sure.
And it's their result of their soul that's struggling against this invading entity.
Yeah. And another thing it can be the invading entity directing this activity through the sensorium of the victim.
Oh, I got you.
They use their energy, because remember, a demon doesn't give anything. And making a bed move is giving. It's putting energy into the environment. They never give, trust me.
So I've always thought when those kind of manifestations that occur during exorcisms, just the demon like showing off for his power.
Well, in a sense he is. I mean, he's using his victim. But look at the effect it has on the victim. Every time this has ever been demonstrated, it's the victim who has suffered. They have been drained of their energy. I mean, I have read cases where, this kind of energy and activity was produced, and the victim aged like 20 years in a day or two. It drains them. It deprives them of their vital force. It takes something out of them because it's their energy that's being used.
You say age 20 years in a day or two, would that be like an irreversible case there where they would remain at this advanced age as a result of that? Or?
You've heard of people whose hair turned white overnight.
Yes, I have.
We always think that it's a joke, but I've actually read some cases where it really happened. It's vital force that's being taken from the individual and used to manipulate the environment by the possessing demon. As you say, maybe they're showing off, showing what kind of power they have. They're trying to terrorize.
Well, in the case like you mentioned, where they might have 20 years drained out of their life, I mean, literally, like they would have 20 years cut off their life as a result of that, or?
Well, that we can't know, because if a person dies at a certain point in time, how do we know that they would have had 20 more? I mean, what we're saying is that it's a subjective impression that somebody looks at them and says, God, they look 20 years older. And yes, their hair may have turned white. Yes, they may have suddenly acquired wrinkles, or yes, they may have, shrunk or shriveled. There are even cases, where somebody loses 15, 20 pounds in a very short period of time because of these kinds of interactions. And it's clear that their energy is being utilized, that their very life force that is locked up in the cells of their body is being drained and used to produce these kinds of phenomena.
So being demonically possessed is no prescription for longevity.
Well, yeah.
this young boy that you performed this exorcism on, even though you really weren't aware you were doing an exorcism at the time, you thought you were doing a spirit release.
Yeah, well, actually, I knew it was an exorcism after I got into it, but at the time, I didn't even know about spirit release.
Were you dealing, in that case, with a demonic being?
I'd say that this was more like a really nasty dead dude. I wouldn't even say that one was demonic. It was too easy.
Well, did you have some cases after that of exorcism that were even more challenging?
Yeah. I had some that, put it this way, we started making jokes about it in my little group of helpers that were helping me with this sort of thing, and we joked that when we came across some of these really, really strange cases, that it made your hair stand up. So we started joking about the part of our normal exorcism equipment ought to be hairspray. And actually, when there were a couple of them that we called, toucan cases, 2 cans of hairspray to keep the hair down. I know it sounds terrible to joke about it, but if you don't joke about it, you'd run screaming down the street because, quite frankly, the last one I did took me 6 months to get over it.
Oh, because it took a lot out of you.
Oh, it nearly killed me. It nearly killed me. And I don't do them anymore because of that.
Yeah.
So it was really an unusual case too, because let me tell you, you can't always tell that a person has a demonic attachment. This particular individual came to me for what would be called ordinary self-esteem problems. Mm-hmm. He had problems with asserting himself. He had problems speaking up for himself. He knew he had some problems, so he came to me with a referral. And I spent several hours, talking to him, interviewing, finding out his background, before we were going to do a session. And essentially, I thought, this is a pretty standard case. We'll just go back in. We'll go into his childhood. We'll find that point in time when he made the decision about himself that his person or his opinion or his ideas had no value, and he decided to stop speaking. And we'll find out what that event was, what happened. We'll reframe it for him under hypnosis. We'll help him to go through it again and to make a new decision. It's kind of like, mental time traveling. You go back and you change the past. Uh-huh. So you get in there, and it's a technique, and part of the technique is to use several kinds of visualization to help the person to deal with what's going on in their subconscious. And one of these is to create a sanctuary to work from. And usually I have them describe it, and then in great detail. And one of the important things about the sanctuary is the door. It's okay, here you've described this place, your special place. Now, what kind of door is on it? This tells you a lot about the subconscious mind of the person, because the door to their subconscious is what this door represents.
Right.
So I asked him, I said, okay, now describe the door for me. He says, I can't. It's covered with a 2-foot-thick sheet of ice.
Oh.
I should have had a clue.
Oh.
But instead, I just, I boldly went forward. Okay, we'll melt the ice. We melt the ice. We go inside and go through several other little operations, and then at a certain point, I asked him, I said, well, okay, everything looks pretty good, and I said, do you have any, do you see any, like, cords or things attached to the body you're describing? Because you have them describe their spirit body. Mm-hmm. And he said, yes. He said, there's this rope tied around my ankle, and it extends off into space. And I said, okay. I said, well, why don't you just pick up that rope and start reeling it in?
Oh.
He said, I don't think we want to do that.
Ooh.
And I said, me? What do you mean we don't want to do that? I've never found anything we didn't want to reel in.
That's one rope you don't want to get to the end of, maybe.
Well, it was.
Unless you're really at the end of your rope.
So as soon as I told him to start pulling it in, all of a sudden, this is when it started really getting weird, because this was the point at which it became like the movie The Exorcist. I mean, I have it on tape. I've let a couple of people listen to it, and then they just get completely freaked out when they hear the change in this poor guy's voice, because all of a sudden this horrible hissing voice came out of his mouth and said, "You picked the wrong one to mess with this time, counselor."
Well, you were beginning to think so too by that time.
I whipped out my hairspray, and I thought to myself, I have to get another hobby. I could be selling Tupperware. And it really got hairy, because this guy was, flinging furniture around, and things were a little bit wild. And this was the one where I learned that demons don't really care if you believe in Jesus or not.
Yeah. That's interesting now, because I've heard different, opinions on that. But I think it was David Jacobs, one of his